Hi, everybody. It is Friday, January 23rd. We are Women's Personal Finance. I'm Regina, and we also have Angela here. And we are talking today with our longtime personal finance cool person who was one of our first speakers for Women's Personal Finance like 5 years ago, Amanda Holden, who has just released a book. And we are stoked. It is called How to Be a Rich Old Lady. You just had your Powell's in-person debut with the book, right? Yesterday.
I did. I'm
And
I'm a Portland girl, so it was good to be home at Powell's for my hometown launch.
I
Someone
think I just
in
read.
Woven actually posted a picture from that launch with like four friends who was there. So that was fun to see.
Amazing.
And I think I read it's on the USA Today bestsellers list now as well.
It did. It broke into the USA bestseller list at number 58, which is it is incredible because USA Today, their bestseller list is all books combined. And so if you scrape out gay hockey romance and the children's books, I'm basically number one.
As a reminder, me and Angela are not financial professionals, so any discussion or comments is just educational and for your deep thinking and enjoyment. I will let Amanda do some brief intros and any disclaimers needed, and then we can jump in.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda. Just a little bit about my background. I did used to work in investment management. Specifically, my job was called investment counselor. And so my job was to be on the phones with high net worth clients, answering questions about the markets, keeping them apprised of portfolio strategy, basically letting old rich guys bitch to me about their money all day. And so it was a great job. I learned a lot, but ended up leaving and starting my own financial literacy business. It's called Invested Development. And primarily I teach folks, mostly women, how to invest. And so I also like to do my disclaimer, which is you must invest at your own risk. And everything we talk about today is not personal financial or tax advice. If you want personalized advice, do work with somebody that can get to know you personally, like a certified financial planner.
Wonderful. And as Regina mentioned, you were actually one of the very first people that came and talked to WPF Insiders back in like 2021. And I don't think we've had you back since then. So it feels good to have you on screen again. And we were talking a little bit before everyone hopped in and we started the recording about how there are a lot more people all of a sudden starting to talk about money in a much more anti-capitalist, anti-consumerist way. Amanda came and talked about ethical investing and what that does and doesn't actually mean back in 2021 to WPF, where, that's always been on topic. And it's been very interesting to see folks that, normally talk very traditionally about money and wealth and all of a sudden pivoting to language that might be more palatable to folks, but whether or not that's actually where their heart lives is a very different thing. So it's always nice to know that there are those folks that have been like really focused in on the hardest stuff and money not for money's sake, but money for all the other reasons. So it's good to have you, Amanda.
I always appreciate being here so much and just having the space to have a nuanced conversation because social media is rough. What people want to hear in a 30-second TikTok is that yes, you can be totally rich and you can be completely ethical, no problem. Here's the solution. When of course the conversation is just a little bit more nuanced and deep than that.
Just a little bit.
So with that, let's like the book title, right? Let's talk about that because like the messaging might be a little bit different than what some people think based on some of the words you used.
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, naming a book is an incredibly difficult task. And it was a huge fight and journey with my publisher. I sold the book under the title Invested Development, which is the name of my business. But I always knew it was going to be something else. I was just waiting for everybody else to catch up. And so I wanted it to be something crazy because I was like, here's the thing. If we're gonna do a personal finance book, it needs to be different. It needs to be fun. It needs to, of course, employ these like very shame-free tactics. But I am also somebody that is very systems critical. And if you read my book, what you will find is that I have, a bit of a sneaky socialist agenda. I am anti-capitalist and I'm really hard on the finance industry. I come from the finance industry. I know how it works. It's a for-profit industry that stays trifling through our pockets. And so investing it's not just about, you know, it's not just about making more money. Which it's that, but it's also about learning how to protect ourselves from an industry that operates like yet another shakedown scam to be navigated, like pretty much every major industry. And so, how do you encapsulate all of that into a book title? It's kind of impossible. Because it's all of those things. It's like both critical and it's like, okay, but this is until the revolution comes, this is the system that we have. And just how can we bring just, a little bit of like calm and levity to the learning process. And so, at first I wanted to name it something like how to buy nipple tassels when you're 80 or like naked rollerblading when we're 80, to which Simon and Schuster said, absolutely not. We're not going to do that. Um, and then I was kind of like swinging over to the other side of the spectrum, and I wanted to name it something like investing is a lie, but you still have to do it, or invest this mess, or the hater's guide to investing, or the disillusioned girl's guide to investing. I actually didn't, for like a big fight for a long time was I didn't actually want it to be gendered, even though I do speak to an audience predominantly of women. And I want to write a book for the girls and the gays and the theys, and it's hard to do that without having some indication that that is what the book is about. Also, the publisher really wanted the word invest to be in the title for like SEO purposes. Like we got to get that SEO hit, but I could not figure out some. Oh, and so at the very end, it was between two titles. The publisher was really pushing for not your dad's investing book, and I was really pushing for how to be a rich old lady. And I basically, we were going head to head on this for a while. And I finally put my foot down and I said, I just like, what do dads have to do with this? Like, I don't want, I don't want dads to be a part of this. And so I'm really happy with where we landed. And what I'm telling people is like, hey, you're a rich old lady. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be old. You don't have to be a lady. It's kind of a vibe. It's an essence. It's really like whatever is your avatar for financial security and financial independence, we're doing it for this person, right? We're not doing it because we actually give a shit about Roth IRAs or index funds. We're doing it to create more options and better options for ourselves right now, but also into the future.
Yeah, it's like you're not doing this stuff just for today, but it's for 80-year-old Angela, 80-year-old Amanda, 80-year-old Regina. Like we need to take care of her. So I like the vibes. Even if lady is not generally the term that either of us use for
Would
ourselves.
use. But rich old lady kind of has like a nice ring to it. It's like it's the combination. But yeah, I agree because that's a big message in the book is like, hey, I wish the system were entirely different. But it is also true that we've seen the elimination of corporate pensions. We are seeing the erosion and attacks on the social safety net, and in particular, Social Security, right? They are trying to break an otherwise very successful program so they can privatize it and sell it off to their rich friends. And so, with Social Security under duress, and then also with this just move to this model, this like 401k model, which is effectively pushing the onus fully on us. Saving and investing enough for retirement I mean, it's fully our responsibility now. Like there is no such thing as a retirement age, right? Like you don't get to walk away from work at age 65. you get to walk away from work when you have enough money saved and invested to walk away from work. And that could happen at 65. It could happen sooner. It could happen later. It could happen never. Again, I don't think that it should be this way. We need collective solutions to collective problems. I actually don't even think that this book should exist. Every single person in the United States shouldn't have to be like a master of portfolio management theory. That's actually so wild. And even from an efficiency standpoint, how does this make sense? But this is the world that they have given to us, where they isolate us from one another. So we basically have to create our own system of security independent from a community or collective system where we would maybe pool resources and take care of one another. It's just, what is capitalism if not like isolating us and putting paywalls around every single thing we need to do and accomplish in this world?
So, Amanda, we have people probably in the audience right now because we have both of our communities here, Woven and WPF Insiders, and that represents people at all stages of their financial journeys. Is there like a quick rich old lady blueprint? Like if there's a couple of main points to hit on what that pathway looks like that we can talk about in a short time, is that possible?
Totally. Regina says that she knows that sometimes I can't shut the F up once you get me started. Um, yeah, so the first step is always building a strong financial foundation. And investing in yourself is not just about stocks and bonds and funds. And we will get there eventually. But a great first thing that anybody can do, especially in this moment, especially as women, where what we are seeing is attacks on women's both reproductive and economic freedom, is just making sure that we are building some financial security, assuming that things might get worse in the near term. And I'm not trying to be alarmist. I just think it's actually always a good idea to make sure that we're doing what we can to be safe in the next year or couple of years. And so,
But also, like, if you're not alarmist right now,
are you even paying attention?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like even just AI, right? Like even if AI comes for jobs, like we're just not going to regret whatever steps we take right now to build ourselves some financial security. And so what does that entail? We know this, but having an emergency fund, making sure there's enough money in there, paying off that high interest debt. And then also, maybe if you are somebody that's just not quite there yet, there's not enough money to put away, there's not enough money to pay off debt. You might be in a scenario where your expenses are currently exceeding your income. And if that's you, it's totally understandable. People are being squeezed on both ends. It's really hard to have a good paying job right now. And this country is getting so expensive. I had to correct myself because Regina just came from Vietnam, where a yum bowl did not cost $17. And so
That's rice and beans and some pico de gallo, which was my first meal purchase post Vietnam, and I almost had a meltdown over the cost. Anyway,
yeah, and so if that's you, if you're somebody that maybe you're slowly accumulating more credit card debt because your expenses exceed your income, that's okay. But that does tell us that the first place we want to begin is really taking some time to strategize making more money. I think as women, especially, we are constantly told to cut back, cut back. And I trust people. I believe that they're cutting back as much as they can. And so let's have this bigger, more interesting conversation about how we can increase our income. Now, it's a difficult conversation because it's a long game. It takes time. It's kind of insulting to hear just like, oh, just go make more money. But on the other hand, I have worked with plenty of men that spent way more time strategizing their next raise than they actually did doing any of the work that they did, whatever their job was. And so you can almost think of it as this essential piece to your experience as a laborer, is like, what are we doing to increase our income over time. And then once you're in a place where you're feeling stable, then what we want to do is move swiftly to integrate investing for the future. Now, this is a step that can be a bit of a stumbling block, and I blame the tax code. So our first interface with investing is trying to pick a retirement account. So trying to pick a 401k or a Roth IRA. And it's really difficult to know which is best because, of course, even in the world of retirement accounts, there are different types of taxation, different options. And so at this point, what I would encourage somebody to do is just remember that a retirement account is just a bank account that gets special tax treatment. And I want you to pop that apart from the investments that you hold inside of that bank account. Yeah, we want to get you the right retirement account, but it is not the difference maker. Your 401k does not generate a rate of return. Your Roth IRA does not generate a rate of return. The investments inside do. And so pick one, use whatever you have, and stop thinking you're doing it wrong. And instead focus on the real work, which is getting money in and then getting that money invested. That second step, that is the difference maker. How much money we invest, how much money we get into these accounts, but then also the investments we choose. And when we're talking about investing, we're generally talking about investing in the stock and bond markets. And a really easy way to do that is to utilize index funds, which are these big old baskets. For example, you can buy every single stock in the United States. You could buy every single international stock. And really, the three core components of any strategy are US stocks, international stocks. Let's not skip these. Okay. And then bonds, if bonds make sense for you. And this way, you have a diversified strategy across what we call the investment markets. And so that's your beginner primer. I would also say it is imperative that we educate ourselves about what the experience of investing in those markets will be, because there's going to be bad years. And one of the most important things we can do to protect ourselves is to know how to be prepared for that. And that comes through understanding it and educating ourselves. What I always tell my students is, you know, learn about this as if your future depends on it, because it does.
We have been having a lot more conversations about international stock investing, especially in WPF Insiders and our biweekly Zooms, where we get deeper into investing strategy for sure, and actually some more conversations about bonds. So interesting to also see how definitely people are picking up on more of that diversified message for thinking about our long-term investments.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always been something that makes me itch a little bit is that, when you log on to social media, you will encounter some sort of influencer who tells you just to buy the S&P 500 index fund. And that has been the story for now a decade. I come from the world of investment management where you would never recommend somebody only invest in any one country, even the United States. That is not considered appropriate diversification whatsoever. And so I have always been an advocate of diversifying at the very least internationally, and then dependent on, whether you need it, also into the bond markets and considering other forms of diversification. And it's good that people are catching up. What I will say is that if you only invested in an S&P 500 index fund over the last 10 years, you also did amazing. So it's great. And so it's all good. But we have seen international start to pull ahead by quite a lot last year. International trounced US. US still did really great. I think the US markets were up a little bit less than 15, and then international markets were double that at 30%. And so if you were internationally diversified last year, you did better than if you had only invested in the US stock market. But it's difficult for people because you look at US stock market returns historically, and they have done better than in the international markets. That is absolutely true. And so the question is whether that continues to happen, which is it's a question for which nobody knows the answer. And so it kind of then boils down to this personal decision and knowing that, with diversification, let me put it this way. You, here's the trade-off. You cannot have the performance of only the best performing category and protection if the worst happens inside that category. And so if your risk tolerance allows for you to only invest in US stocks, that's fine, but I need you to know that that's what you're doing. Whereas a more diversified strategy is to say, hey, I'm willing to give up a little potential on the upside, knowing that I have some protection if again the worst happens.
So I went to look just for comparative sake. So my domestic index fund that I'm most invested in is ESGV, which is Vanguard's ESG ETF, and that was 11.5% over the last year. And then VSGX, which is their international ESG, which is my other one that I have invested in, is up 29.73%. So like that's that's some wild numbers right there.
Yeah, big
Um,
win, big win for those of us who go 50% international.
And I'll throw in, I'm the person who's mostly just done American like VT SAX in the past. I'm more thoughtful about where my money goes now, but I also don't have the same amount of income to invest as I did when I was dumping most everything in there. And one of the things I try to tell people too is also like, don't make trying to be perfect, like get in the way of getting started because you can adjust course later. And that's also what I'm telling myself at times now too. Just remember that you can continue to diversify, and that should be part of your strategy for most people as you continue to get closer to retirement anyway. So don't feel bad if you've done something very simple just so you felt like you could get going, because I know that's something that stops a lot of people is stressing about how much international, how much domestic, do I need bonds? And then they just don't do it.
well, and like I started with Edward Jones. Like my first um, rollover IRA from I had a very short-term, like weird city municipal retirement thing that I rolled over, and I rolled it over to Edward Jones. Was that the best choice? Maybe not, but it was a choice. And did I invest money because it was open? Yes. So, you know better, you do better, but even if you are picking a, high cost fund, if you paid an advisor too much money for a number of years, like it hurts to see the graph of the difference, but like we only compare graphs between, well, if I had done it myself or if I paid someone a high fee, not if I paid someone a high fee or didn't do anything at all. And I think we sometimes unnecessarily beat ourselves up about that.
Yeah, thank you both for saying that. That's really, really important. I think in the book, what I say is like, you don't need to nail the perfect switch leap on the first try. You just got to get your ass on the dance floor. Okay. So,
Exactly.
and truly, like if you only invested in a US index fund, you've done phenomenally. It isn't we're also just at an interesting moment right now where the shape of an S&P 500 index fund has changed dramatically as big tech companies have gotten so oversized. They are now so bloated that that's just another reason that people are starting to look at that and being like, it's not that I made the wrong choice 5 or 10 years ago. It's that this fund has changed. And maybe what we had thought was like good enough diversification 10 years ago isn't true anymore. And it's not because you did something wrong, it's because the fund looks so different than it did 10 years ago. Because what we now know for anybody that's, maybe not reading the financial news, which honestly good for you, is that these seven, the Magnificent Seven, seven tech companies are now so big that they make up about 40% of the S&P 500 index fund because these index funds and the indexes themselves, they are what we call market weighted. So a bigger company is going to have more weight in the index. And then you're going to be invested in more of it in your index fund. So for example, Microsoft makes up probably 8% of the S&P 500 and Chipotle makes up 0.15% of the S&P 500. And so if you only invest in an S&P 500 index fund right now, 40% of your strategy is invested in seven tech companies.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. And like, Nvidia was not, anywhere near any kind of top a decade ago. Like, I feel like even more than like Meta and Google and stuff, Nvidia just like breaks my brain a little bit because of how much it is such a huge market share, and a decade ago it like wasn't. But also that means that some of the stocks that were there a decade ago or 2 decades ago, like you go back a few decades and some of them aren't even in the index at all anymore, which is also a little mind-boggling.
So, like, investing is passive, but it's not, right? You still have to stay involved, and continue to have some conversations if you want to make the most of it. It does require a little bit of ongoing effort. So, are we back to blueprint? Is there a next step in keeping up on things once you start to do your investing angle?
Yes and no. So I would argue that we're still predominantly doing passive investing when we're adding in index funds that invest in the international market and also the bond market. If you were to buy, for example, like one fund that invests in the entire US stock market, one in the entire international market, and then one in the across the bond market, say like the bond market in the US, you could also do it globally as well, then you pretty much own everything that there is to own, right? And so that kind of three-pronged strategy, I would say, is about as passive and diversified as you can get. And so they are both technically passive. Now, I would say what's maybe kind of an interesting strategy right now is in the biz, we would call this overweighting to smaller companies. And this is a way to take some of the teeth out of these big tech companies that, if one of them gets banged around, we're really going to feel it. And so even though small stocks, because they are small, they make up a relatively small proportion of the market. So like let's say it's only like 5% or 10%. There are a lot of folks that are saying, okay, I've got those small stocks in my total US stock market index fund, but they only make up like 5%. But maybe what I want to do is I want to consider strategies outside of what it means to be truly passive or invested in everything by overweighting small stocks or mid-sized stocks. So maybe you have, in your US stock market allocation, you use a small cap or mid cap index fund and you make it 15% of your strategy. Now we are starting to get into what would be considered slightly active management because you are overweight to small stocks relative to the market. But I think it's fair to consider strategies outside what we would normally consider to be passive investing in this moment so we can reduce some of our single stock risk or single sector risk, right? For with technology. I know this is maybe like getting a little bit into the weeds. And so let me also just like give an easy peasy solution, which is target date index funds are really awesome if you want an all-in-one strategy. So these core components that we've talked about, a US stock market component, international and bonds, you can buy them bundled together in one of those funds. You've probably seen them that have those like super futuristic far off dates like 2065. That's an indication that it is a target date fund. And the idea is that it is best practice to be invested in a diversified way. Investified, new
That could have
book
been a book
title.
title.
Yeah.
Round two.
And it's your one stop. And so like we know that. And so it's become this kind of newer product that is like this one stop shop. Jeremy Schneider, who does Personal Finance Club, which is like a really wonderful resource as well, he compares it to instead of buying the Coke and the fries and the burger separately with like your index funds, you're buying the combo meal and they are all packaged together. If you do that, do make sure to look for the index variety because just as not all funds are created equal. Some are high cost and actively managed. Others are lower cost and index, and these tend to perform better pretty much universally across the board. Same idea with target date funds, where there are versions that are packed full of high fee, actively managed funds, and there are versions that are very super sleek and just have a couple of index funds, low cost, get you invested in the markets you need to invest in.
I should go back and clarify, Amanda. I have a tendency to do this. I have a couple insiders who correct my language all the time. When I say passive in this respect too, I meant more that if you're picking a single section of the market, it may not be something that you just leave forever. Like may need to be a little bit more active in thinking about it and adjusting things over time versus like actively picking stocks. So some language issues on my part there. And so I hope
No,
that's
not an
clear.
issue at all. And this is like what's kind of interesting is that like a lot of these words have meanings that like we kind of understand in like a general colloquial sense, but they also have very specific meanings in the world of investing. And like, let me just give you like another example. This is kind of getting a little bit niche, but the words value and growth have very specific meanings when we're talking about stocks in the stock market. We're not just talking about growth or we're not talking about value more generally. They mean something very specific. And so, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. And in the world of investing, passive versus active are different types of investment strategies. Index funds are passive, but yeah, great clarification.
Yeah. Um, and then there's a comment in the chat asking what your thoughts are on what's going on with precious metals right now because the prices
Oh,
are so bonkers. I want to say too that I just wrote a post in Woven a couple days ago comparing like how much $100 from 25 years ago would be worth today. And like gold has been bananas for the last 25 years, which like doubly outperformed the S&P 500, which completely like broke my brain a little bit when I was writing that and looking up numbers. So with that caveat, yeah, they're curious what your thoughts are on precious metals.
hey, I mean, here's the thing. I'm never worried about people wanting to get more diversified and to seek out options for diversification outside of the stock market, especially if you are somebody that is just struggling with like what feels kind of like the ephemeral nature of owning stocks. Like when you own a stock, you do own shares of a company, but it's clearly not something that you can have and hold. And some people I know just do better when their investments are physical, right? Whether it is precious metals or it's real estate or land or what have you. That being said, I think most people who are investing in precious metals probably aren't going to be owning gold bars unless you are. And if you do that, I think that that's great, but you got to learn how to do that. You're going to have to learn how to store them and you'll need a safe, you'll need to insure those gold bars. And so that's certainly something that you can do. Um, what happens with gold and silver moving forward, it's really difficult to say, right? Like part of what like makes maybe like investing people like me itch a little bit is just because there's like no mechanism whereby we can truly understand where the price of these things will go. Gold, we love gold. Everybody loves gold, but like gold is not a particularly useful metal. And so the price is only driven by how much we want or don't want this thing. And so that makes it, in some ways, somewhat more speculative, right? It relies on this collective belief in the value of this thing. And granted, it's the same for the stock market, right? Us wanting stocks, us buying into stocks is the mechanism that pushes the price higher. Same with gold and silver. But a stock, a representation of ownership in a company, is what we would call a productive asset, where there are people behind the scenes that are working very, very hard to capture more market share and create profit, whereas a gold bar can do no such thing. And so we are at the whims of just how much people want it or don't want it in the future. And by the way, it's the same idea with cryptocurrency. Now, I I think that gold and silver will continue to grow in value, but it's just again, it's so difficult to know. And and what I will also say is that like when you are investing in gold and silver, most people are investing in funds that are not even actually backed by gold and silver. And so oftentimes the funds that we look to purchase that would invest you in gold or silver are actually funds of futures contracts betting on the price of gold and silver. And so, if what you want is like a real hard, tangible of the earth investment, then just know that you are not getting that with a lot of the funds that exist. You are getting like genuinely traders betting on the price of that product or that commodity bundled into a fund. Now, some of them I do believe are backed by actual gold and silver, but it's not also not like you could trade in your fund for gold or silver. And so I would say it's slightly advanced, but it's certainly something that you could do if you were looking to diversify. Um, the one other thing that I want to say, and I'm like, okay, how do I say this? How do I say this as sweetly as possible? We cannot only be interested in investments after the price has already come up. That tells us we're not ready for that thing, right? If it was cryptocurrency that the price had spiked right now, that's what we would be talking about right now. But it's a sign that we're not quite ready for investing in that thing if we're only interested in it when the price is at the most expensive.
Yeah, that's the be greedy when other people are, I can't remember the exact,
Fearful
what is
and
it?
fearful.
Yes.
Be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy.
Not
That's
exactly,
Warren
but
Buffett, yeah.
similar idea there. I do actually have a quick story about gold that blew my mind in Vietnam that I have not, I think, really talked about anywhere yet. I was with a friend there and we were going to go have dinner and they said, I have to stop and sell some gold first. And I was like, what? What? So we went into what looked like a bank, but also had a bunch of gold for sale. And they had like a ID'd little card with a physical amount of gold in it. And they transacted and got cash, but said also that they can have this money sent directly to their bank account as well. And I asked later, because of course, I'm like, this isn't a thing that we do this way in the US. Like people buy and sell gold, but it not the same. And they said that they are not very comfortable investing in the markets there because the returns aren't as good and it's more volatile. So they invest in real estate and they also buy bits of gold every now and then based on where the prices are, and then make a decision when they need cash on if they're going to pull cash out of their bank account or if they're going to sell little bits of gold. And seems to be a pretty normal type of thing there that is not something I had really been exposed to. So, of course, my brain got going on like, well, how do you track it? How do you really know? Because I would want to quantify, kind of like a first in, first out type of a thing. Like, is it really beneficial to sell my gold right now? It could keep going up. And but it sounds like it's just kind of a on vibes. Like, gold is high right now and I'm going to go ahead and cash out. And that's just part of their normal um, monthly money management strategy.
Yeah, and,
So,
and I like it. And I think that I mean, the lesson to be learned here is just like you can almost think of diversification as just having a lot of options. And so having kind of these like different pots that are bubbling over with options that you can pull from now and into the future.
so can we also talk, you talked about comparing the different, domestic and index fund or international funds. And we talked a little bit about ESG funds. And I would love to talk a little bit about that. Again, when we were talking before we started, you mentioned some folks talking about how, you can invest ethically in ESG funds and then everything's perfect and sunshine and rainbows. And, you and I both invest in ESG funds while also understanding like it's a low bar. Like it's not something special that is like makes me feel like I have all of my money in like the perfect place. Um, so yeah, I would love your thoughts a little bit on that because we both have made that decision, also knowing that it's not really the decision that it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would even give us a little bit of credit that when we were doing it 10 years ago, it actually was a more ethical option. But what we have seen is tech companies turn into surveillance and wartime companies. And it's not that they weren't always that, but it does feel like we've like crossed this Rubicon. And now tech companies, which make up the majority of all funds, including ESG funds, are simply no longer ethical. And so it's tough, right? Because with like, for example, the ESG funds that you use are the ones that I use and the ones that I also talk about in my book. And the reason I know that I use them, and I'm guessing it's the same for you, is because they're index funds, so they're low cost, but then they screen out both fossil fuels companies and weapons makers, so defense
Mhm.
contractors. So it's an index fund minus weapons and oil. And that was pretty good, right? And it still is pretty good, but it probably makes the most sense like on the level of me, like it allows me to sleep at night. Like I don't want to I even if I have to lose a little bit of profit, I don't want to profit every time, you know, Lockheed Martin wins a contract from the US government. And so
Or
in
we take over a country for their oil,
exactly.
hypothetically.
Exactly. And so there are ways to do it. Like I would say it's like slightly more ethical, right? And you are sending a signal into the world when you say like, "Hey, I'm going to choose this because like I don't want this thing." But any honest conversation about what is held in an ethical index fund would be incomplete if we don't have a conversation about shareholder capitalism more generally, right? Shareholder capitalism, this idea that these big corporations are extremely extractive, which means they pull value out of the earth, resources, and also labor. They see labor as a cost to be minimized. That's why it's so hard to get paid fairly at one of these big corporations. And they create profit off the backs of resources and labor, and then they siphon up to the shareholders. And so you don't have to be a fossil fuels company for that methodology, the way that we've arranged our economy to be pretty unethical, right? Because when you look, for example, if you look at an S&P 500 index fund or a total US stock market index fund and you strip out the weapons and oil, what is left behind? Big tech, big banks, big pharma, mining companies. And so I mean, it's all pretty unethical. And it's tough because we just exist in this system where we are kind of forced to have to participate in this thing that so many of us don't agree with and we hate. But like it's also hard because what other choice do we have knowing that compounding returns, the type of compounding returns you can get from the stock market, is one of the only tools we have if we ever want to be able to untether from labor.
And that is definitely something that has been very hard for us to get through people's heads. Like, I'm certain you find that too, is that either it seems like there are folks that are just like, yeah, it is what it is. I'm gonna invest and I'm gonna get mine. And then it is really hard to convince people that have really started, especially, a lot of people who have done a lot of boycotting over the last couple of years. They understand that like what you do and don't spend money on is voting with your dollars. And I've definitely seen a lot more commentary being like, but I've specifically stopped shopping at Target. I've specifically stopped shopping at Amazon. How can I then invest my money in an index fund that includes those companies?
It's totally fair. I mean, I totally get it. And like something that I can offer to you as an investing teacher is I'm not going to tell you that you're thinking about it wrong. Like I am very willing to also battle back the same cognitive dissonance like with both arms that we're all dealing with. And I just it's just like such a bummer that like in order to be a good person, you have to take a vow of poverty. And I would just, encourage people to make a difference in the ways that they can that are not going to put themselves at risk of living in elder poverty. Because here's the thing, like not investing in your 401k is going to put you at risk of living in poverty. Canceling your Prime membership will not. Moving your money from a credit or from a big bank to a credit union will not. And so it is a very interesting decision to forego investing for your own future in that it comes at a very, very, very high cost that I ask people to take seriously, especially considering the fact that you investing or not investing will not make a difference. And here's what I mean by that. This is going to get like a little bit into the details, but I think that like this is important to understand about the investment markets is that stock prices are ultimately a downstream effect of profitability. And so, if what you want is to thwart corporations, then we have to stop buying whatever it is that they're selling. Because the companies that we're still going to be talking about 10 years from now, the companies that are going to be dominating our index funds are the ones that make money. And so that's our best and most important tool. But I think there are also a lot of people that don't actually want to cancel their Prime memberships, but they will go ahead and cancel their 401k contributions. When actually, if what you actually want is to make a difference, it has to be the other way around if you're choosing one or the other, right? And even in terms of like divestment movements. And so I do a lot of speaking and teaching on divestment movements as well. So, for example, like the fossil fuels divestment movement, it primarily focuses on institutions because encouraging individuals to divest from their 401ks puts individuals who are already living in financial precarity because this financial system is precarious by design at risk, where that's not the case with institutions and institutions like, for example, like city pensions or big pension plans. Um, they don't take on such risk, right? They have other options for investing. And so that's why this focus is on institutions. Even with institutional divestment, it is not true that if even like, let's say, I think California, the UC school system did divest from fossil fuels. And even then, it is done so understanding that that probably won't drop share prices. Now, wait a minute, you might be thinking, I thought it was people buying in that pushes the price higher and people selling out that drops the price lower. And that is totally true. That is factual. But selling out of these stocks is not the end of the investment story. Often, if there is a price drop in a certain stock, these big money investors, including the corporations themselves, will swoop in and buy that stock for cheaper, and they actually earn the alpha on that trade. And corporations do this all the time. It's called share buybacks, where they buy their own stock when it's selling for cheap, which then inflates the price right back to where it was. And so, by the way, every time Lockheed Martin gets a defense contract, they may turn around and use that money from US taxpayers to buy their own stock to push their own stock price up. And so it's really, really difficult to punish these corporations via their stock prices. Like you could almost think of it as like that would be like knocking off the bud of a plant, hoping that it would kill it. When really what you need to do is you need to dig it up from the roots, right? Like we have to demand that these, contracts with these private contractors aren't made. We have to stop using Amazon. We have to stop using these products. And it's really difficult to do because they get us so hooked and relied on whatever it is that they're selling. But that's truly the path forward is boycotting using these corporations.
I feel
I'm
like
definitely in
this
agreement there.
last 2 minute is like I need to just like drop it in the comments anytime somebody argues with me on this.
Well, it's like right, and that's what's so hard is it's like a lot like people just want to be pandered to. And so there are people that want to hear that nothing you do makes a difference. And so just do whatever you want and get rich. And then there are people that want to hear that like, oh yeah, you can totally invest ethically. It's like totally a thing that you can do, right? Like I see some of like, the folks that do what we do, like they will get millions and millions and millions of views and likes on these, threads about how it's like totally possible to invest ethically. And it's just like, it's just a bigger conversation than that.
I
Which
have a
is
follow-up
why, yeah.
question on that piece about boycotting and working to reduce their profitability because one comeback that we get that I don't know that I've ever had like a great answer for other than I'm looking to see new systems emerge is that if you're relying on the investments and the profitability of those companies to fund your potential retirement, like how do you deal with actively trying to reduce those profits as well? And we're doing that, but I don't know that I have a great answer other than like I don't know what the system's going to look like. I don't know, but I don't want it to be this one, and I'm willing to see what that process looks like. It like what's how do you answer something like that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, I would give up any number of investment returns for a world where we had some checked corporate power. And that feels like it's just like the only thing we can even like maybe hope for during our lifetimes. It's not enough because what we need is to abolish shareholder capitalism. And so I actually believe that the most ethical thing that any of us can do is to hold on to our investments loosely and be willing to let it go if if something better comes along. But what we find is that that's just not the way it is, like, right? Like, I'm sorry for any boomers on the call, but like we have seen like the boomer generation hold so tightly to their forms of wealth that they are willing to sacrifice a functioning society because of it. And we cannot be that way. And so yeah, a lot of what we're talking about is like kind of temporary fixes. Like, how do we get in this moment the violence to stop or to at least subside? But really, what I think is that the whole thing has to come down.
And I think that's, a lot of it too is that people have to realize, like, because we've also been asked, like, well, but that means you might be personally worse off. And it's like, yeah, like that true. Like those of us who have done very well, being very intentional with our money, we may find a point where, yeah, if our money keeps growing like the system has continued to move, like the three of us are going to have too much money when we're old. And like, I am very happy to think of a future where I don't have too much money because we have shifted things dramatically. But there are a lot of people who do not like the idea that they personally, individually may be worse off or comparatively worse off than they are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, a lot of people are financially traumatized. And being alive in this world is financially traumatizing. And it's not just like financial, it's like quite literally your survival. Like there are we have survival needs. There are material needs of being alive in this world. And so no wonder people cling to whatever little source of power they have. I totally get it. And so I don't know what that's probably like how we see our way out of this, I don't know, but I do think it's worth just having a conversation about like, hey, like it is true that this stuff might not work out, right? Like it is true that we might not get investment returns in the future like we did in the past. It is true that we could experience whole-scale financial collapse. Like all of these things are within the realm of the possibility. And so what I encourage us to do is, not even like worry too much about the future. I know we're all worried about the future, but just take some comfort in knowing you're doing what you can right now, right? Part of what makes investing for your future, I think, so beneficial is there's just like daily stress in living with no fallback plan at all. And when we engage in this nihilism of like, oh, well, I'm not going to do anything because the world sucks and the apocalypse is my retirement plan, right? Like you've heard that before. Well, if you are not investing because your worst fear is having nothing, the only way to materialize that fear is by doing nothing, right? And so we're also just kind of like hedging our bets here.
So
I
we
think
are
that's a good
coming up
summary
on the
of
top of the
our
hour. Yeah.
just how I think how we have tried to answer that question to people. Either we keep investing and it keeps going like this is, and we have to have the money, or the system collapses and there's something much better where I don't need that much money and I'm fine if my wealth is significantly less after all this happens. or everything gets worse and we're all worse off. And yeah, yeah. All right, Angela, I cut you off.
Oh, no, no, I was just saying that we were like at the top of the hour and I feel like we talked a lot of big picture stuff. Wanted to come back to the book. I was texting with a friend and they are a financial advisor. They own their own firm, and they said that Amanda's book is the best personal finance book I've ever read. So, I didn't tell you that before this, but yes, I should send you a note message with that. But they run their own firm and they said that this is the book that they're going to be recommending here in the future. So,
So, can you
Cool.
wrap up with also making sure people know the best ways to go about getting your book right now? Because there have been some supply line issues.
Yeah. So let me see if I can find the link. Of course, I did.
I can look for it right now.
Okay, great. It's just I think linking just to Simon and Schuster, which gives you a couple of different options. Yeah, I ran my pre-order campaign in partnership with bookshop.org because I wanted to support independent bookstores. Um, we kind of ended up breaking bookshop.org. We ended up selling way more books than they had in stock. And so unfortunately, Bookshop is still back ordered on the book. And then interestingly, Bookshop happens to share a distributor with Target. So you can't get it at Bookshop, you can't get it at Target. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it you can request it from your local independent bookstore. And then of course, if money is tight, you can request it from the library.
So, yeah, for like in our newsletter and when we shared about this event, we contributed to the problem by sharing the bookshop link. But I mean, that's kind of like a very good like example of like what we're dealing with though, right? Is that like you went to the most ethical place to sell your book where it would have been easiest and simplest to just blast Amazon. Um, and you didn't, and now you're in this place where people are now waiting on their book. And honestly, if it's me ordering the book, like I'm okay waiting an extra month to get it from Bookshop. Um, but those are also the choices we're going to have to collectively make in
Yep.
order for it not just to be Amazon. So like it is a very hard place too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So we're out here doing the right thing.
but don't buy it through Bookshop if you want it anytime before like March. Yeah.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
if you're okay with introducing more friction into your life and building resilience in that way, and you can wait a whole month, is that about what you expect the time to be, Amanda?
Don't even know that
Any ideas?
can buy a book right now on those platforms.
Oh,
You might be able to, but I what I would say is if what you want to do is support independent bookstores, something that's really awesome is asking your independent bookstore, you requesting it from them, and they can order it from the distributor even if they don't have it. And that way, also that independent bookstore has it on their radar, and then they might carry it in the store because my book, because it's new, is still probably not in most independent bookshops. And so,
So someone just messaged in the comments that it's in her local bookshop right
yeah,
now.
yoink. Thanks, Katie. Yeah. And so that's just also like it's like, oh, who doesn't want to be in like independent bookstores? Like that's also the dream. And then Barnes and Noble again actually like does, is Barnes and Noble evil? Who are they owned by? Are they private equity owned?
I mean, there's also like levels of evil, and I would still
how
buy
evil.
from Barnes and Noble before Amazon. So,
Totally. And at least from like a book publishing standpoint, like it keeps the publishing industry afloat. Barnes and Nobles does.
hmm yep. But that could be a whole nother conversation
Yeah.
too about how like Kindle Direct Publishing has been such a like boon and a trap for small indie writers especially. So,
Yep.
but we could have that conversation another day. But for now, if you want to buy Amanda's book, um, local bookstores, Barnes and Noble, The Evil Empire are pretty much your options right now. And the library,
Or
of
wait.
course. Oh, no, a number of people say the ebook's available at Bookshop. Melissa
Yeah.
said her local bookstore has a copy too. Libro FM for audiobooks.
Yep,
So
audiobook. Well, I read the audiobook if you want to hear the sweet sounds of
Yeah,
this
you did it, right?
for 9 hours. Yeah.
yeah, how was that? I know we're like over, but I'm just curious, like, how was that experience, like reading your book aloud for the audiobook?
I loved it. I mean, I really loved my audiobook team and just like having to be in the studio. I mean, it took 5 days. So being in the studio 5 days with, I mean, they're my girly whirlies. Like they're my girls now. Like we're just like hanging, gossiping all day, doing a little bit of audiobook recording. It was just like so fun because so much of book writing is so solitary and such a slog. And so it was cool. It was really great. The only thing I didn't like is you do it after the book is already sent to the printer and you do find typos, which made me want to die.
All right, Amanda. Well, let's try to make it not be a full 5 years before we snag you again for a chat. Good luck on the ongoing book tour. Where are you headed next for a live?
Next Tuesday, I will be at Brooklyn Public Library for an event. I do
All
think it
right.
is, I know it's cool. I do think it is sold out, unfortunately, if anybody is in Brooklyn. But yeah, I'm just doing New York City and Portland, um, my two hometowns, just because you have to pay for your own book tour and it's expensive. Traveling is so expensive. And so I'm hoping to do something in the spring. My New York City book launch event, we did have drag queens, and I would love to take Dragonomics on the road, but we'll see.
All right. And then if people want to find you elsewhere, investeddevelopment.com, is that the website? Did I?
So you can go to amanda-holden.com
Okay.
and that has all my stuff. On social media, I'm at dumpster.doggy. That's on Instagram and TikTok at dumpster.doggy. That's kind of where I do most of my business. I'm not like updating my website all that often. So come find me on social media.
Wonderful.
All
Thanks so
right.
much for
Thank you
joining us
again.
Thank you
today.
for having me. Thank you for everybody who was here.